Today's webinar series is on getting to know Linux OS. So when I talk about OS operating system, every day, every people are used with their operating system. When you take your desktops, take your mobile phones, everywhere operating system plays a major role for us. Okay, so that is what we are going to discuss in today's webinar. So the first thing for today's table of contents, what we are going to discuss is the introduction. We have overview of Linux, and we'll be discussing about the basic fundamentals in the field, a simple demo and the state of art, what are the evolutions in the field and career paths, and what are the job opportunity. Get to know about the Linux so the first, let's start with the introduction part. So in the introduction we'll be discussing about what is Linux, why do you need an OS operating, who created Linux, the benefit of using, what are the benefits of Linux. So this is what we are going to discuss in today's webinar. So let's start with what is Linux. You can see here what is Linux. So when you see at the image, what you have seen here is S390 is a mainframe server. Okay, so when I talk about what is Linux, originally developed for 32-bit x86 based PC, ported to the architecture. So Alpha, VAX, PowerPC, IBM S390, MIPS, IA64. These are the various portable architecture where you can use Linux. So PS2, Tivio, cell phone, watches, Nokia, N810, NDS, and the routers, NAS, and GPS. So when we talk about Linux, each and every day what we use our devices, so cell phones, it is real, let it be a laptop, let it be any device you use, definitely Linux plays a very vital role in that. So that is what Linux is all about. It is very portable to any devices. So what is Linux you have seen. So why do we need OS? Why do we need an operating system? So when you talk about an operating system, generally when you talk about an operating system will have an application connected to that. You have a monitor connected to that. You have a printer connected to that. You have a mouse connected to that, and keyboard and the hard drives. So when you see this particular image, the operating system will have a main role in controlling all these things, that is application, monitor, printer. So operating system plays a major role in our lives, okay, in our lives, day-to-day lives. So when you go enter a supermarket, so there also you will find a monitor and a printer, which everything mouse will be connected to that, so they will be using for their business needs. So operating, or that is why we need an operating system. So without an operating system, we cannot use our desktops, we cannot use our laptops, we cannot use our mobile phones. So that is why we need an operating system. You know who created this? Let me just talk through the person who has created in way back in September 1991. Linus Torvalds, a second year student of computer science at University of Helsinki, developed the preliminary kernel of Linux known as Linux version 0.01. So this was the person. So you can see the image. In this image is the person who's responsible for having this Linux operating system. So when you try to compare the Linux and the Windows operating system, there you can see a lot of major differences. But this person has created this Linux being a second year student. So now you can see, you can see the state of mind what he has. So he is a person who is intellectually, he thought about the people, that people should use this operating system. That's the reason he found out this operating system. Now when you compare yourself, students, the participants who are being connected here, so you can see, so kindly you can see here the person responsible as who's created. And also when I talk about this particular student as a Linus Torvalds, Andrew Tenenbaum, person is a famous author of a computer networking book. Okay, you can go and Google yourself and find this person. Andrew Tenenbaum is a good author for computer network. So he has appreciated. He was a professor for some other college. He has appreciated his work, what he has done. Okay. This is about who created a Linux operating system. So let's move on to the benefits of using Linux. Okay, so when I talk about the Linux, so it is free. Why it is free? So when I talk about free, the best benefit of using Linux is that you can download this from any website easily. So you can find this operating system easily, download it from any website, and you can use it. Okay, it's virus free. So virus free, viruses are usually developed for Windows OS. Most viruses are developed through ActiveX, which is usually not found in Linux. So free to do what you like. You can do anything with this operating system. Like Linux is an open source system. It is an open source system. It's an open source system. Now let me talk through the overview of Linux. So we have discussed in the introduction part about what is Linux, why do you need an OS, who created Linux, the benefit of using Linux. This is what we have been discussing. So I started with what is Linux, and I've been explaining you about the 30-bit, 32-bit x86 based PCs, and where it can be ported, Linux ported, and why do we need an OS operating system. And I also been talking about who created Linux, Linus Torvalds, the person who he was a second year student, University of Helsinki, and developed this preliminary kernel. And we have been discussing about the benefit of using a Linux. Now let's move on to the overview of Linux. In the overview, we'll be discussing about Linux as an open source, Linux and the world, Linux advantages and disadvantages, and the principle of Linux and GNU Linux. This is what we are going to see in the overview of Linux. So let's start with an open as Linux as an open source. So when I say it is an open source, so you can see the symbol here. I have shown you in this PPT. The symbol is the for the open source we use. So the idea behind open source is that a program may read. Okay, you can read the program, distribute it, change the code, and code will mature. People may adopt it, fix it, and debug it. So when we talk about a Windows operating system, can anyone can go and change the operating system, Windows operating system code? No, you cannot do that. Only the person who has created the person can only change that code or debug the code or fix it. So this all these things can be only controlled by the Microsoft company, whereas Linux is an open source. Anybody can read the code, distribute the code, change the code, and code will be mature. People may adopt it and fix it and debug it. This is what you can do with the Linux as an open source. And the second thing is the developed software will be more elastic and much better quality software. It is then that has been developed by conventional methods, because of many people have tested it in a dissimilar condition than software developer for a single company may. So you can see here the company, the people who have developed this particular open source. It is an open source software. Okay, it is an open source operating system. You can do anything with this. You can develop anything. You can develop your own applications in this particular operating. So when I talk about the Linux in the world, so today Linux has connected the desktop market too. So it has connected. So in each and every company, when you go, when you sit for an operating system, or when you work in an MNC company, Linux plays a major role. Okay, so you will not be having any Windows operating system. So all big companies like MNC companies like TCS, Wipro, all this companies will, all the employees will work in the Linux environment only. So that's the reason you should know this Linux operating system. So without this, you cannot work in an MNC company. So today, Linux has connected the desktop market to Linux developer concentrated on the services, networking, and the beginning and the next office application. So when you compare this operating system Linux with a Microsoft operating system, so you will have, you have to separately install buy the office Microsoft Office application, whereas in Linux you need not buy anything. So all the extra features like office applications, all the softwares related which are used for the users flexibility, or they want to work with the softwares, with the basic softwares, they can have it in the operating system. So many says that Microsoft is ruling this market, but many alternate have been started from last couple of years to make Linux as a suitable choice as a workstation. So in almost all big companies, I've been talking about all IBM, Infosys, Wipro, and all these companies, they use Linux as their workstation, and giving even easy interface and more compatible office applications are very easy, like word processors, spreadsheets, presentations are very easy. So that's the reason we use Linux in almost all companies. They use Linux. So some of the advantages of having a Linux: so Linux is free, downloaded entirely free from the internet. You can download, go to the website and download from the Red Hat or Fedora Core, SUSE, all this operating system websites are there. You can do it for no registration fees, free update, no cost per user, and free code is in each case can change required and behavior of the system. So Linux may be ported in almost all hardware platforms. So let's take a simple example where Linux is being used as an operating system. When you use a Raspberry Pi, when you use a Raspberry Pi IoT device as a Raspberry Pi, there also you have a Linux operating system, a small device where you have this particular operating system. So Linux is versatile and secure. Security model used in Linux is same as Unix security fundamental. Linux is robust for enemy attacks from the internet, but also adapt to other situation, utilizing high standard of security. So when you talk about the security, so it is not that easy to have an viruses attack in the Linux operating system or the Unix operating system. But whereas in Windows, it is easy for attacking. So these are the advantages. It's Linux is free. It can be ported to all hardware platforms, and it is versatile and secure. So some of the disadvantage. So some of three disadvantages I have highlighted in this slide. So Linux is not user friendly. It is not that user friendly, not easy to understand as a beginner. So when you talk, if you are a beginner, it's not that much easy to work in the Linux. So you need to know some of the basic things so that you can work in the Linux. And it is open source products are trustworthy. Again, it's a big question mark. This is and what advantage. So something, if a person is giving free, you may trustworth it. Okay, so something someone is giving free for what reason, we may again question him. So how something is free is reliable, again that is what I mean to say. How something is free is reliable. So whatever the operating system we have, if it is free, how reliable, how I can depend on that. Okay, so these are some of the disadvantages you have in this Linux operating. So what are the principles of Linux? So although there are huge number of Linux implementations, user will find a lot of dissimilarities in the distribution. So you can find the Red Hat 7, 8, 9, each and every updations compared to Windows operating system or the Microsoft Windows operating system. Each and every year there is in the 6 months or the 3 months there is an updation of the Red Hat, Fedora, SUSE. All these versions are very difficult to remember, and because every Linux box with the building blocks puts together as per user own wants. So Linux stimulates the imagination and creativeness more a user realize what power of the system may give. So more user will try to redefine its limit. Installing the system is only the beginning along with the term relationship. So you try to install it so user can create your own applications in this Linux operating system. So that is what the principle of Linux. So when I talk about Linux GNU is nothing but graphical user interface. So it's not nothing but the screen you have. So Linux appears dissimilar depending on the distribution, the hardwares, and the personal taste. But the fundamental, which all graphics and other interface are built, remains the same. So Linux system is based on graphical user tools which provide set of standards to handle the user system. Almost all your things you can see in Windows also you have a graphical user interface. So all GNU tools are commonly open source and may install in most of the systems. So you can install this GNU Linux in your. Now when I talk, you can see the screenshot of genome.org, where you can see the Linux operating system screen will look like this. So you have a floppy, you have a dial-up connection, you have a Red Hat Thrash home drive. It's similar to your Windows, but only thing is gem file, and you have a brush selection, and you have home folder files like this. Okay, so this is the GNU Linux. And then the basic fundamentals in this field, you need to know the basic commands and the Linux, basic file permissions you should know, making use of binary reference to set a permission, manage local Linux user and groups and administrators. So this is the basic fundamentals in the field. So to learn the Linux, you have to know this basic. So the basic commands and basic file permission, and how to refer the reference using a binary set permission, and how to set your user permission, group permission, administrators. Okay, so this is what we. So first we'll start with the basic commands. So the basic commands, Linux accepts all commands as Unix. So type command, you have to use this particular when option called dash. So ls does nothing but listing the file. Hyphen a has a dissimilar meaning of double dash given here. So list hyphen all. So to see the content of a directory, you have to just type this ls/etc followed by enter. So this would display the content of the directory rather than the present directory. So when talk about the basic commands, if you want to see the file in the command mode, okay, you can see in the graphical mode also you can see the file. But when we talk, we want to see the file in the command mode, so you have to type this particular command ls-a or lfi/etc and just enter. So this are the some basic commands you should know. Make directory, copy command, remove command, all these things when we get into the details part. So these are the basic commands. So basic file permissions, again when I talk about the basic file permission, each and every file and directory has three users. So when I talk about the Linux, it has three users. One is the owner, next one is the group, and third one is your all users. So when I say the owner permission applies only the owner or a file or a directory, they will not impact the action of the others user. So it will not have any impact on the group users. So second one is the group. So group permission applies only to that group has been assigned to a file or a directory. They will not affect the action of the other users. So all means all user permission apply to other users on the system. So when I talk about the basic file permissions, so this you should know owner, group, and all users. So hope it's clear. So making a binary reference to a set of permission. So permissions, groups, and types is one should feel natural. So set the permission by making use of binary reference. You must first understand the input performed by entering the integers. So you can set the permission ch. You can see here a sample permission string would be ch. Mode means nothing but change the mode of the file 640. So here what you need to understand is 6 is the number, 4 and 0. 640 is nothing but the what we have discussed in the previous thing, owner, group, and others. So this number what it refers is 640 refers, 6 refers for the owner, 4 refers for the group, and the last one refers for the other users. So this is nothing but it is based on the read, write, and execute permission. This all this numbers what we can see in terms of binary file system, we are trying to set the permission, which means you can see here, which means the owner has read and write permission, the group has only read permission, all other have no write permission. So you can see here 6 is nothing but the value for read is 4 and the value for write is 2 and value for execute is 0. So read, write 4 plus 2 is 6. So in the case of owner, he has read and write permission, and the group has a read permission, and all others have no right to file. So this is what you need to understand. Okay, so now we'll see how to manage a local Linux user, group, and administrator. On Linux system, each and every one file is owned by the user. Whatever the file you have in your Linux system, it is owned by the user and the group. Every category of user may consist of read, write, and execute. That is what we have discussed in the previous thing. So and may be granted or revoked. So you can use this binary reference to grant the permission, to revoke the permissions. You can see in the previous slide ch mode 6405. That means we are trying to change the mode of the file for read, write, and execute. This is what user may consist of read and write execution and may be granted or revoked. So when ls-al command is given, it shows a file permission for user category indicated in 9 characters. That the characters you have, you can see here. So in the previous slide, you can see here this 9 characters. You can see B, R, W. All these things are nothing but your 9 characters. We have discussed about the managing the local. So this is a simple demo where when you log into a Red Hat enterprise Linux server, this you'll be having a root login, you will be having a administrative login. So this are the details you have to enter. Again, you have to remember the password, you have to set the password while installing the Red Hat operating system. So this is a simple demo how you can see that particular, how you after installing your Linux operating system, this is what the screen you'll be getting it. So state of art, nothing but Linux audio 208. So when it comes to the audio and all the devices compared to your Windows Microsoft operating system, the audio drives we need to keep installing separately, whereas in Linux it's a inbuilt software. So the audio part, it is used in all the music stations, big functions or the parties, they use Linux operating system. So you can see here the world of Linux audio covers many domains, from basic desktop to sound services to embedded system, from simple internet telephony to demand of professional recording studios. This article presents an overview of Linux world and its current status. Sound support in Linux has progressed grandly since My first experience in the system is 1990. The mainstream distribution have all excellent device detection. So you can easily detect the device software in this particular thing. So including sound card detection, desktop audio functions, conflict transparently during the installing. Evolution in the field. So you can see the evolution. So the mobile phones what we use, it is having an Android, but it is based on your Linux operating system. So the operating system, whatever we use in every field is the Linux. So it has evolved greatly in all fields, the Linux operating. So operating system is a program that acts as the interface between the user and the computer hardware control and the execution of all kinds of programs. Linux is an open source operating system. It's freely distributed. This already we have seen cross-platform operating system based on Unix. So Linux consists of kernels and some system programs. There are also some application programs for doing work. Kernel is the heart of an operating system. When you talk about Linux, kernel is the heart of an operating, and set of tools are used for the system call. So defining a component of Linux is the Linux kernel. So hope I or first Linux kernel 5th October 1990 by Linus Torvalds. We have already seen his picture. So Linus based system is a modular Unix like operating system. It derives much as basic design for principle established in Unix. Such a system use monolithic kernel handles process, networking, peripheral, and file management access. All these things will be done with the Linux operating system. So when you talk about the career paths and the opportunities, you when you go through this particular Linux, you will be designated as database administrator, network administrator, security administrator, so web administrator, and the storage administrator. And you can see in almost all companies, when you get into an MNC company, this roles will be very important for you: database administrator, network. So when you are interested in database, you should master Linux. Good networking, again, for networking also you should master the Linux networking administrators. In terms of securing your data, you want to keep your data very much secure. Your role will be as a security administrator. And you want to develop a web Apache web servers, your Linux system plays a major role. You're going to maintain the data centers, web servers, using a web administrator. And finally storage administrator, again it's booming up all the cloud environment. Your data are secure. You want to keep the data very much secure, and the backend will be your data centers will have a storage administrator. So these are the career paths and job opportunities when you master yourself in Linux operating system.